Hey everybody, I'm Kevin Hoyt and welcome to the show. We got a special discussion today. We're going to talk about the opioid crisis that's happening not here just in Vermont, but all across the nation. I've got a guest, Richard Bogardus, who's very knowledgeable because he's family. This guy knows what he's talking about, right? He's my cousin, but we've both experienced some personal issues with the opioid addiction. And again, I think it's one of those things where it affects all of us, whether if you're not addicted yourself, it's your husband or your brother or your daughter. So this is something that I think is facing everybody in America, and it's to the point where the overdose epidemic, in particular fentanyl, I guess is what we're talking about, is some really scary stuff. Again, I want to review some of those statistics right off the bat. What did you say, 140?
142 a day.
142 people a day. The last time I checked, it was about 125, which was a month ago. And again, that's the amount this is growing by every year. It's worse than any pandemic that's ever hit the United States. More people are dying from opioid addiction and overdoses today than the Black Plague. So specifically, I looked at a couple different states. New Hampshire and Massachusetts, our neighbors, are really high on the list. The death rate in New Hampshire right now is about 34 people per 100,000, which is insane to me. West Virginia actually is 42 people per 100,000, so some very serious stuff. In particular, I know I checked on with a couple coroners in Ohio, and in Ohio they don't even have enough room for the bodies anymore. These people are dying at such an alarming rate that they have to call on the funeral homes to temporarily store the bodies until they can be taken care of. Ohio specifically spends around $5.4 million a day, a little over $2.2 billion a year just on the dead ones. That's not the people that are addicted. That's not recovery or law enforcement or treatment. That's just taking care of the dead bodies. So again, this is something that affects us all, and some very scary stuff. Now, Rich, you've had some experience with it before, right?
Yeah, 3 times now.
3 times, and you're talking about personal family members or close friends?
One family member, 1 friend, and 1 extended family member, yeah.
Right,
So.
right. And again, was that like heroin and fentanyl specifically, or pills?
It wasn't heroin, it was all 3 times were pills, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do you want to share a little bit of that experience? I mean,
Well, a little bit. Well, first we need to know that pills are basically heroin. They're almost identical in molecular structure. Mm-hmm. You know, you're using a needle and it's a more intense, quick high. Right. But when you're addicted, it's just basically the same addiction. So, right. We need to get that out of the way. My family member got addicted to pills. I won't go into the circumstances in the long story, but he eventually got in trouble with the law because when you have an addiction and you're trying to fuel it and you're not working,
right,
it's very expensive. So
you got to pay for it.
You're right. So he got into theft, and from there got busted and did some time. My friend, again, an addiction, went into the Suboxone, and then from there got into alcohol because he was thrown out of the Suboxone, and that wasn't good. So he had extreme medical problems, but he's doing well now. So
right, they just changed one addiction for another.
Exactly.
Essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the Suboxone program a little bit too, because I'm for and against at the same time.
I'm the same. I don't know what to think of it really. Yeah.
Yeah, and again, we do have to mention these 2 empty seats right here, because originally we had Dr. Closter, who is the leading expert for Southern Vermont, and then Chief Doucette. Now, I think both of them have a couple personal reasons why they couldn't be here, but I want to talk about their role specifically too. And again, I agree with you. I think if you've got a $100,000 a year habit and you're only making $25,000 because you live in Vermont state, I think that inflates our crime statistics as well. And in my experience, again, I've known lots of good people who became addicts, and that's the path that you almost have to take if you're going to.
Yeah, you got to get the money somewhere.
Yeah, that's it. And again, this is something that affects everybody. It's not just the addict,
right?
But it's the whole family. It's all your friends, everybody around you.
If it hasn't affected you yet, it may. So
yeah,
these people need our compassion, not our scorn.
Yeah, and that's another great point. I mean, most of these people I see society look at them as a junkie. It's just a junkie, and we're going to kind of ignore them or push them over to the
Right.
side until it's your daughter, until it's your husband,
It's
until
always
it's your
somebody's friend. It's always somebody's mother, father, grandchild,
right,
whatnot. So,
right. And the same for, I mean, overdose past the leading cause of accidental death, and I do think it's an accident. You know, ahead of cars back in 2007. So over a decade ago, this became a real problem, right? So now we're at the point where it's totally out of control. And again, I think when your average addict, you know, does heroin or takes any of these drugs, really, it's not going to happen to me, is the general consensus.
Oh, sure.
In fact, you know, you hear about these Narcan-resistant drugs now, right? Or the super fentanyl that people only takes 2 salt grains and you're going to die. We have cops and police dogs that are, you know, just from contacting this stuff or having serious
Right.
medical issues. But I think from an addict's perspective, that's actually like a plus. Like,
Right.
ooh, they got better stuff than I have.
We have Zohydro now, which is a pill form of an opiate, which is 10 times as potent as Vicodin.
Yeah, that's,
I mean,
yeah, why? Why would you need it?
right.
That's some insane, crazy stuff. So I don't think, again, I don't know what the answer is, though. What do you got for ideas as far as how do we even begin to look at this and solve this?
Well, I don't think we're ever going to solve the drug problem. I think people have done drugs for thousands of years and will continue for thousands of years.
Right.
With that said, what do we do? What do we do as a community? We're dependent on our drug policies, state level and the federal level.
Right.
My opinion, education is where we need to start. I don't know what we do as far as education for drug education, elementary level, middle school, high school. I know a couple of years ago when my wife and I were cursed, I should say, with this problem, we attended the local community movie and discussion of the Vermont pill problem called the Hungry Heart movie. They held it over at the Arts Center. And
how long ago was that, just out of curiosity?
4, 5 years maybe.
Yeah.
And it was a packed house, and I learned a lot from that. I was just stunned at what was going on, and that was the beginning of the Suboxone. That was my first introduction to it. I didn't even know about it.
Right.
And it seemed great, but I have reservations. But the health teacher from the high school spoke. After the movie, stood up and spoke, and he emphasized beyond belief that we do not educate our children enough. He said, I'm basically it, and I get 2 weeks to educate our youth.
Right.
And like I said, I don't know if there's much before then. I know in my era, there was basically nothing.
Nothing, right.
So I wish I knew more about how we educate them, but I do think that, like everything else in life, we need to start educating our kids, and it's going to take years, decades to take root, and,
Right.
and for us to see the fruits of it. So
Yeah.
the sooner the better.
I agree.
And I don't have the answers of how to do it, but you know, there's some smart people out there that should be able to figure out a good system of education, so that we can get started.
Yeah. Well, I mean, law enforcement is another huge part of that. And again, that's one of the reasons I wanted Officer Doucette here, Chief Doucette, was because I think, first of all, by the time they get to him, they're already at that criminal level where they're robbing and doing other things. So he gets to see the worst of the worst, right? And I'm sure in his opinion, most of these people are bad people from his perspective and what he sees. But again, I see the good in everybody, and all I can think of is the guy that fell off the ladder at work and got an injury, and of course he's in real pain. And then he goes to his doctor, who says, you know, here you go, this is your cure. And of course you listen to your doctor, and then the next thing you know, you're addicted and you're in trouble.
Yep.
So that's the scary part of that. The same with Suboxone. I mean, my understanding of Suboxone, I understand that you don't just stop heroin. In fact, that could be detrimental to you. You can die from that, right? You can go into shock.
The withdrawal is awful.
It's bad, right? And I've seen that, the sickness. And in fact, that's another weird thing is most of the people regarding heroin specifically that I know, they hate heroin as much as they love heroin. They just don't have the power to stop it themselves. And I've seen the same thing whether we're talking pills or alcoholism or any of them. It's just the human will. I don't know if it's enough to do it by yourself. Even love, even if you're talking about a spouse or a kid, it's very difficult to stop on your own. So in terms of Suboxone, I get the idea behind, you don't just stop, so we're going to put you on the Suboxone program, and then I thought the principle was then we slowly wean you off this to get back into it. But I don't really see that. I mean, I know people 5, 6, 8 years that they've been stuck on Suboxone now. And again, Suboxone's another thing that can be and is used. There's a market for it on the street, absolutely. And a lot of people will sell their Suboxone so they can get dope because it's cheaper, right?
Crazy.
So you're getting a 2-for-1 special type thing. And again, that's where I wish Dr. Klauster was here, because I think he's got personal experiences. I think he's a great guy with a good heart, and he has good intentions. But he's got the perfect job. He's got job security. There's no shortage of addicts looking for help. And when they come to his program, they're treated with Suboxone until they screw up. And then they go magically to his rehabilitation facility, or one of them. He owns one of them in Vermont. There's only a couple. And once they finish that program, they come back to him. So I don't know if, again, it's just trading one addiction for another. Like you said, I'm going to stop heroin to drink a couple bottles of Grey Goose every day. I don't know if that's much of an improvement, right?
Right.
So I don't know. What's your feelings on Suboxone now that you've had a little more experience? The same concept, or?
Yeah, I'm on the fence with Suboxone because it's obviously less harmful than the heroin addiction, but it's still something that I would like to see them, like you said, wean them off of it, get them off of it, so that they're not on this for 8 or 10 years.
Right.
I don't know. I wish the doctor was here so he could explain it a little more, because
hopefully we're going to have some other interviews where I'm going to get these guys when they have time. Again, I think it was a time scheduling issue, but hopefully we can have them in here and we'll have that discussion, because I'm very interested in it too.
Yeah, there's a program that a police chief in Gloucester, Mass. started. It's called Police Assisted Addiction Recovery Initiative. And I think the guy's name is Campanello, the police chief. And what it is, in fact, about half of the nation, half the states in the nation at least have one police force that's in this program. And what it does is it creates a little bit of a better relationship between the police and the community, and they help the addicts. If you want to come get some help, that you can go to the police and they will find addiction recovery and get you into a program instead of just arresting you, which obviously it's not working too well. So there's one, I think it's the Middlebury force in Vermont that's in this. So it's something that maybe the Bennington PD could look at to improve community relations in our own community here.
Right. Yeah, and the overall result is that it helps them, because I know, treatment is hard. It's actually hard to find a place, right? Especially if you go to Hawthorne, which is our local, hubs and spokes, they call it. So Hawthorne is our spoke, right? But the problem is, if you screw up once and you get thrown out of the Hawthorne, the next spoke is in Brattleboro, which is an hour away. And again, a lot of these people don't have jobs, don't have transportation, so just getting there and getting that help is hard.
And you can basically sign yourself out, I believe.
Yeah, I think you can
unless,
too.
I don't know.
Unless it's court ordered.
Right. And I don't know how that works. I wish I knew more about that. But,
yeah.
I know a couple of times where people have gone, and after a week, they just they can't follow orders or whatever, and I'm out of here.
Right. Well, it's hard, I'm sure.
Oh,
right?
absolutely. It's a lifestyle change, and it's quick. You go through that addiction recovery after a couple days, and then you get through that, and then you're like, Jesus.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's another great place to go too, as far as the regulation of this and legalization even, which will never happen in America. But that, I think, is one of the problems. These people, I've been doing heroin for 5 years, and I'm used to how much I can do, and I've got that all down. And the problem is that I'm doing more. Like my initial thought when I heard, you know, they're overdosing on heroin, it's because they took more than they were used to taking. But the reality is they're taking the same amount, it's just a whole lot stronger
Right.
than it was before.
And they're putting fentanyl and God knows what else into
Right,
it, right?
it's what they're cutting it with.
Right.
And again, when I talk about legalization, which even sounds crazy to me, the reason I bring it up is they used it in Holland. Amsterdam had a huge problem with heroin. So for the first couple years, they went around with a couple methadone buses and were giving out free methadone and doing a needle exchange, which I think even in the U.S. people would have a problem with giving out free needles.
Yeah, it's a concept where you think, geez, you know, we're enabling the use. Well, it's happening, so it's lessening the effects on society. There's a lot of transmission of disease, hepatitis, AIDS, whatnot.
Right.
Hepatitis C has tripled in the last 5 years in the United States.
Right.
So it's much better on society as a whole to give out clean needles than to have people sharing them. And you know, we don't need a surge in hepatitis C. That's
I know in Amsterdam, that's what did it for me. One of the interviews they had, I saw a documentary on it because again, I was very interested in the whole concept of legalizing heroin because it sounds insane. But the first elementary school teacher that they talked to that was saying before we couldn't let our kids go out for recess because there were so many needles. And they figured in the first year of this needle exchange program, they took 1 million needles off the streets of Amsterdam. That's incredible to me, incredible, right? And part of that program, again, it started with methadone and needle exchange, and then eventually it led to legalization, which sounds insane, but it worked.
Right.
And I'm not even sure how it worked.
You know, I'm an advocate for getting rid of the drug war, and I would say legalize it, strictly regulate it, educate and rehabilitate. That's my, you know, it sounds crazy. Sure, it does.
It sounds so simple when
I
you
get
say
that.
It doesn't sound crazy.
I get that. The World Health Organization has come out and the United Nations and have said we need to decriminalize drug use.
Right.
Sounds crazy, right? Well,
Yeah.
Portugal did that, what, 15 years ago?
Right.
They decriminalized small amounts of drug use, personal drug use. Dealing is still illegal. What we've seen, some reports say that they've cut drug abuse in half in 10 years.
Yeah. How?
What if that happened here? We'd be high-fiving each other, you know?
We would be.
They've also cut spread of infectious disease. Crime is down, and drug use has been level.
Right.
But now, don't confuse drug use and drug abuse because they're really two different things. Drug abuse has been cut there tremendously. So
Right.
they're not considering going back to, you know, the big war on drugs. So that speaks volumes in its own right.
The death rate has dropped, is what you're saying.
Overdoses have been cut. Some reports say by 3/4.
Yeah.
So that's tremendous.
That's kind of what we need now.
We're going like this. They've cut theirs by 3/4. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad to see President Trump actually had some agendas lined up to deal with this, or at least allocating a bunch of money to go somewhere to deal with this, right? Which is awesome. But that's the point where I think we're at. I'm almost ready for the CDC to declare a state of emergency because I think the numbers are really that high.
I think I read somewhere that they have declared a.
Have they? Well,
yeah, recently.
They should.
A state of emergency. Yeah.
Yeah, I do believe it's a state of emergency. And then again,
doubt.
when we're talking about government involvement, what is that government involvement? And specifically, what I'm talking and hinting towards here is where is this coming from? Where is all of this fentanyl, all of these drugs coming from? And a lot of it, you know, I've seen your post, and I agree with you to some extent that I think the government is actually responsible for a part of this.
Where the poppy fields today, they're mainly in Afghanistan. We've been there with a military force for 16 years, and we hear all kinds of reports about how we're guarding the fields. Well, why?
Right.
Couldn't we just go in there with, you know, hatchets and chop them down, or drone strike them, or whatever, and get rid of these fields? But
well, and I think that's an economic question, to be honest. I think because that's what they grow over there, and you say, okay, well, why don't they grow potatoes instead? Well, because it would compete with the American potato industry, and we don't want them growing potatoes, which is so foolish to me.
That opens a lot of questions.
It does open a lot of questions. So again, I don't know. I don't know the answers here. This is an open floor discussion where we can talk about it, and I plan on having the same conversation. I don't know. I don't even know where to go from here.
it's a situation where it's just sad, and we need to start looking at our policies. We need to start asking questions,
Right.
and trying to figure out ways to lessen the problems, and stop all this crazy crime and what's going on, and all these endless strings of arrests, and start to help these people.
Right. Instead of treating them like scum of the earth.
Instead of throwing them into the court system, maybe we could have a drug court. I really don't know if that would help the situation other than lessening the burden on the court system. Get them through quicker, get them into treatment quicker.
Yeah, I'm sure the court system's got to be overloaded with this stuff.
And
too.
from what I've said, treatment would save us billions of dollars over sending them to jail over and over and over and over.
I know one of the coroners I spoke with in Ohio literally said that 60%, 62%, I think it was, of all of his business, which is all the dead bodies that come, everybody that dies goes through the coroner.
Call it a business, but it is.
62% of the people are now drug overdoses.
Wow.
So that's, I mean, over half of the people that are dying in this country are dying. And unfortunately, the demographic is really young.
Right.
I mean, I see, 15, 16, all the way up to, I think it goes forever, but I'm going to guess it's, from 18 to 35 is a real...
Nobody likes to nobody likes to lose a child, but I mean, can you imagine?
No.
And now it's happening a lot more than it ever has.
150 times a day. That's incredible. I know one of the things, again, that affected me, Turning Point down here had a candlelight vigil one time, and they asked me to film it for Catamount Access, Cat TV, so I went down, and I cannot tell you the emotions that went through me. I was crying as a cameraman. There was one specific kid that passed away, and his mother was up there, and his mother, told her story, and you just talk about heart-wrenching. You could feel it. You could see her. It's tearing me up just even thinking about it.
Right, that could have been me.
Yeah, it could have been.
I was pretty close. So.
Yeah, well, and that's the scary part. Like I said, I know of people that have died and were brought back from Narcan. I've got a lot of friends that are addicted to, not just heroin, but a number of different things. And again, these were people I grew up with that I never would even thought they would dabble in this stuff, but for whatever reason, they're there now. They started, and now they can't stop. So I don't know how to help them, but I want to help them.
Yeah, and I think we need to stop treating these people like they're terrible people.
Yeah.
They're doing something that's wrong. It's against the law. Yes, we all support our law enforcement.
Yeah, it goes back to the question though: how do you help them? You don't give them money. I know that.
It's
right?
tough love. You have to have tough love with these people because otherwise you're enabling them.
Right. Well, and that's the fine line that's hard, especially as a loved one. Right. You love this person.
Right. Right.
It's hard to draw that line. I think
it is.
And the same thing. These people need money for other things too. So your intention is, okay, here's $20 to go eat.
Right. But
the
you know what's
reality
going on
is,
with that.
right,
Yeah.
15 of it at least is going
Yeah.
to their addiction, which is horrible.
And it's tough because heroin is so much cheaper than the pills. So when you get addicted to the pills, it's going to be a lot easier for that person to go out and turn to heroin.
Yeah. Well, I think that was, again, the pharmaceutical companies. Everybody's got a role here. Oxycodone specifically, right? They started that. Lots of people are addicted on it. Then we said, okay, that's dangerous. No more of that. And what other choice do they have? They're not going to go from an oxycodone back down to a Vicodin when a Vicodin costs $30 and you can get a bag of heroin for $10. Right? So I think it's financial. I think there's so many components here.
I saw a documentary on PBS. It was called Chasing Heroin. It's something that everybody should watch. The drug czar for President Obama, when we started to crack down on the pill epidemic and started to enact the laws to stop doctor shopping and stuff like that, he knew that this was going to create a problem and that they were going to switch to heroin. And he told the President, Obama, and not to, frown on him so much, but he told him point blank, we're going to have a heroin epidemic, and the drug cartels are ready with the supply, and it's going to happen, and here we are. So
right. So they even knew
so
it
they
was
basically
coming.
we didn't do anything. We knew it was coming. Our own drug czar told our president, and
yeah,
you know,
that's just scary.
it's sad, you know.
Yeah.
It's sad.
Well, it's the same with, you know, we talk about law enforcement, and maybe these people don't need to be necessarily locked up, but at the same time, I see these Bennington is full of heroin dealers, right? We bust 5 or 6 a week, sometimes 30 a week when we have these big raids, and as soon as we take them out of the picture, the next ones are right there to fill up.
It's an endless supply.
Well,
I mean,
and likewise, that I see that kid is back on the street doing it again a month later. Like how is, you know, is the answer again for the dealer piece? Do we really want to hold them accountable? And as examples?
That's one of the reasons why I would favor legalization, because I don't like drug dealers. I think that's one of the biggest problems with the drug problem. And let's face it, prohibition laws are out there not to arrest people. The design of a prohibition law is to curb use. Right. So how is it working?
Yeah.
We're at the highest rates of drug use and abuse in history, so it's not working. But what a prohibition law does is it creates a black market, and black markets are what illegal dealers use. Right.
To make profit.
So would it be better to strictly regulate those like we do alcohol?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know, but it's something to consider.
And like you say, do you take your common user and maybe decriminalize that piece, but then the actual dealer is who we hold accountable? I mean, a lot of laws are changing now where, you know, if I sell you heroin and you overdose, now that's a liability for me.
Right.
And I love that.
Right.
Because I do think I have a responsibility if I'm selling you that that product, right? Or bad product. So I think that's a help.
Yeah, especially when it's tainted and they know it's very dangerous, you know.
If 2 other people have already died, why am I still selling it to everybody else? Exactly. Yeah, I see the same thing. All right, well, I think that was a beautiful conversation. I think we're about out of time, but I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate you sharing your stories with us and your thoughts. You got anything else you want to say before we call it quits here?
I just wish we had a couple others, you know, the doctor, somebody from law enforcement. It's just to hear their end of it, you know, because I'm here to learn as much as I am to share my my thoughts and what's happened. So
gotcha. Well, I can guarantee you and everybody watching out there that when this airs, we're going to have lots of other commentary from other people, and because I want those outside pieces.
I hope this starts a discussion, and you know, we don't get personal with it. Just keep it low key, and then let's try to
stay to the facts and
try to figure this out and
it is very
help
personal.
Help everybody out there.
It's an emotional subject. It's very personal for a lot of people. So I get that point, but I do. That's my part. That's why we're talking today. I think discussing it is the first step. Talking about it, having open discussions. The same thing for your loved ones that are addicted. Talk to these people. Tell them your real feelings. It's hard to watch a loved one die, right? Tell them that. Let them know how you feel.
It's something that I wouldn't wish on anybody. It's one of the hardest things I've certainly been through. So.
Yeah, draining. And it doesn't even have to be you. Just watching a loved one go through it.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, everybody, thank you for joining us, and I'm sure there's going to be more on this subject. Like I said, it's personal for me, and I plan on taking it to the next level and talking this with a lot of people. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me, Kevin. I appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, buddy. Thank you for watching. Check in soon.